Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching and listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. It's always very special when a CRA Academy alumni comes on. And we have Jason Santos here. He's now a senior CRA for a for a large CRO, sorry, the largest one. And his LinkedIn will be underneath this video or in the show notes if you're listening, so you can connect with him on LinkedIn. But he took he took a circuitous path, but he's done CRA roles, senior CRA roles, CTA roles, project coordinators, trial associates, lab tech. I mean, he's done everything. And he's now in a position where you're in charge of other people, no?
I'm not in charge of other people.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess, a traditional field monitor, CRA, working on oncology studies at IQVIA.
On call. And prior to this, you were at a cutting edge company doing CRISPR gene editing, and this was in the peak of that company's time, and you've seen the companies, do very well. You've seen the companies struggle. So it's interesting that you have the both of the sponsor and the CRO experience. I think that's
Mhm.
actually something that is valuable that, believe it or not, a lot of people don't have that are monitors. They've always just worked for CROs or been contractors, but you've worked for sponsors as well.
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. There's definitely differences working on each of those sides. It's all the work that we do together too that I find to be, we're all a team. So on my day to day, I can't, I don't quite notice those things, but when I look at the big picture, it's like, okay, there are definitely differences between working, on the CRO side, helping our clients of pharma and biotech companies, but then also just, being on the for me, the pharma side, which has a whole other array of experiences, and they all intertwine together. So the experience has been very valuable to me.
Yeah. Have you done other therapeutic areas besides oncology?
So I worked on like some rare diseases, genetic diseases like sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia.
Yeah.
That was more on the sponsor side. Most of my experience is oncology. Um, and then in my support roles, I touched upon, like as a CTA, a project coordinator,
Hmm.
I touched upon all different areas, but it wasn't heavy on therapeutics. It was more heavy on the operations, which is
Okay.
really where I learned most of everything outside of actually monitoring. That's like those were the roles that I really learned about all that.
Yeah, you got to get your hands dirty to learn. And we'll get to the CRA Academy in a bit, but I wanted to get your take on the latest developments happening in our space. You're at a company where I don't think there's been that many layoffs. I haven't at least seen in the headlines too many
Mhm.
from your company. Your company is probably one of the better positioned in the entire industry. What's been the pulse like if you've got your finger on the pulse of the job market? Because there's people watching that have been laid off. There's people
Mhm.
watching that want to get in and they just lucked out, and it's like maybe one of the worst times to try to get in as a CRA.
Right.
What is your take on all this and any advice if you have?
So I do definitely see, well, I actually see more of a need for CRAs. That's a job that I see that folks are always looking for. Of course, they're
Still,
always looking for, yeah, I mean, they're all looking for senior CRAs. But I think we have a lot of entry level or junior CRAs out there who are still struggling to get to that level. But I've noticed in other groups, specifically data management, because after I got my Master of Public Health, I wanted to move into data management, and that just seems to be a job. The role's being outsourced. Especially at IQVIA, where I am
mm,
now, there just really isn't opportunity because it's all being outsourced to other countries.
yeah.
But there are other routes I can go. I'm still climbing the our CRA ladder that we have. There are multiple levels at IQVIA. I'm
Hmm.
currently at the level where I can mentor other CRAs, which is great. I always
Yeah, that's what I
love to
was alluding
share.
to in the early on in the intro. So not you're not in charge of other people, but you are in a sort of a mentorship role with others.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, and I
gotcha.
just started doing that, and I really like that because I think the CRA role could be very, it's a very independent role. You're not necessarily working with your coworkers every day. You're probably speaking more to your sites than anything. And so I always think it's great when CRAs can come together and actually talk about their experiences, talk about what's going on, tips and tricks. Like, hey, I had this scenario. Like, can you
Yeah.
help ground me from
Yeah, there's
this?
man, I did a video on this yesterday. Where is that book? It's a really small book, Ayn Rand, The Virtue of Selfishness. And it sounds like a horrible title, but if you read it, it's actually says a lot of interesting things. But one of the chapters it gets into the how capitalism works, and it talks about there's only two things if you distill it in a social society, which we are. I mean, capitalism, US, you can't be more capitalist and social than we are. Social meaning interacting with people. It boils down to two things, and it's increasing your knowledge and then trade. Those are the only two things you have to give to other people. And by you being a mentor, you are essentially doing the knowledge part. You are increasing your mentee's knowledge based on the knowledge you have. And hopefully, you are also improving your own skill set so that you can trade more skills, leverage more of your skills in the future for future roles. And I think
Mhm.
more people need to focus on this because there's people that have the opportunity to be mentors and they think they don't have enough time or there's nothing in it for them. And I think it's like a very like of course it's altruistic, but it's
Yeah.
also in a way and in a good way selfish. It's helping you develop your own career too. Even though it's indirect, it is at the end of the day helping you help yourself. So I
Mhm.
think that's more CRAs need to take coordinators under their wings and like you're doing, you're also mentoring colleagues, but I'm sure you've taken a few coordinators under your wings. That's like the nature of the game when you're a CRA, right?
It's true. Yeah, I actually really enjoy it. I'm a big believer in if you can explain something to someone or teach someone something, it just fortifies your own knowledge.
There you go. That too
Yeah,
fortifies your own knowledge. Yeah,
yeah,
because
because
at
there's
the
so
end of the
many
day,
things
that's
that
all
we
we
do.
have. There's no way, like, you could live 1,000 lifetimes. Maybe not, maybe that's too many for research, but you could live like multiple lifetimes and still not learn everything about our industry. But with other people, you kind of can get closer, at least for yourself, or for, like you said, fortify your own knowledge too.
Yeah, when I decided to get a Master of Public Health, my focus was program management and like a small concentration in pharmaceuticals because I really wanted to know more about all these different levels and even aspects that I don't really touch, but I'm part of that pipeline. Um, and actually recently I've just been learning about histology and that animal tissue work that they're doing in, preclinical, non-human studies. And like this industry is just so vast.
Yeah,
Like
it's never
you
ending.
can, yeah, like I have my partners in histology, and it's just the things that I learn and what he has to do is crazy.
It's
Yeah.
completely different, and it's in the same industry. Outsiders
Yeah,
would think you guys are doing the same thing when
right.
in reality, it's completely different. Well, what is your take as we zigzag through this interview? You're an oncology monitor, so I'm assuming you go to a lot of AMCs, academic medical centers, to monitor. Do you also have private sites you monitor?
Yeah, right now in my 3+ years at IQVIA, it's been a mix of big hospital systems, small little offices. It's sort of like you get the whole gambit. And I think working for a company like IQVIA, you really get a lot of that exposure to a lot of different scenarios. And I'm sure you've talked about how, even monitoring spaces are like a little hole, a little closet, or actually just like a space in a
Ooh.
hallway. And then other
The
places
worst
you
is when
have
they
like,
give you co-monitoring with like four other people that you don't know, and then two of them know each other and they're talking the whole time. You're like, what the hell is going on? You know, I told the coordinator never put me in a co-monitoring space if you ever get a chance again. I've had a few stints monitoring oncology. So I've
Hmm.
monitored AMCs. I have very limited exposure to academic medical centers, but I've seen, and this was before the NIH cuts, I've seen the turnover at these places. Like, I could say it now because it's been long enough. UC San Francisco, right? One of the most prestigious academic medical centers. And you go one day for one monitoring visit, you have a coordinator. The next time you go, 4 weeks later, oh no, that person's gone. Now it's someone else. Okay, well, here's the action items from that person. Thank you. Next time you go, 4 weeks later, oh no, that that one's gone too. So like,
Yeah.
it's just like musical chairs, and no one's really doing the work. And I found that very frustrating monitoring academic medical center. I guess it's anecdotal. I mean, it's
Hmm.
an N of one, but what is your experience on that?
Very similar to what you just said.
Okay.
There is a lot of, I mean, I think in a lot of aspects in our industry, there's a lot of turnover. Um, I don't think anything is like, it's none of it's malicious intent or anything like that. It's
No,
just sort
no.
of the way, it's sort of the way the timeline goes, the logistics of everything. And I do see that a lot of people, especially after about 2 years, a lot of people tend to move around a little bit. I've done it myself. I know that, in this role, I think it's a very rewarding, fulfilling role. I feel like I'm doing something important, even on the days that I'm really just, paper pushing. But at the end of the day, it's like, this is contributing to, people, especially when I'm source data reviewing, verifying, and, I see like when a patient passes away while on study, and
Yeah.
it's just like, it's kind of sad. Well, it is sad. Sorry, it's not kind of sad. It is sad.
It's
And then just working with the people that you work with, I think it's important to have a, positive attitude. And I'm lucky that 99% of my sites, all the staff is just really great, whether there's turnover or not. And yeah, and it does leave a little bit of a mess when there's a turnover. I mean, it leaves a mess too when CRAs transition as well. But I think, everyone I've worked with has been amazing. We roll with the punches, and whether it's something hard or something easy, just picking up action items. But I think, but with this work, it comes together. There are times of frustration for sure. There's a lot of camaraderie when you can actually build relationships with your site. I was just at a site initiation visit and on Monday in St. Louis, Missouri, and the staff was just so amazing. Like
AMC
I
or private?
It was a private hospital,
Okay.
um, but it was just nice to see like how friendly they were and willing to cooperate with things just hadn't been done. It was a dry SIV. There was a lot of items not together yet, but they were so great. It's like I want to help them.
Are the nice experiences like few and far between? Like, are most of them not friendly and cold, or whoa, you're in the Northeast too. You're in Boston.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not known for
Um,
being friendly necessarily up there.
it is a little cold in the Boston area, not temperature wise, but it can
Both.
be. But yeah, but I find like in my region is Northeast, but I like to help out where I can if there's business needs. I'm not too tethered to my hometown, but
Yeah.
sometimes you get out there and you meet like such interesting people. And like on this Monday, I did an SIV. Like I met them for the first time, and I swear, like I wanted to hug them because they were just so great, and I'm not a hugger.
Yeah. I've had those
Um,
experiences too, where you're like, okay, and then it becomes easier as a CRA to mentor, the people there that may need help. There's a lot of the CRCs there that are learning the rope. So you feel like doing your job just a little more, like an extra incentive to do a good job as opposed to when the other party's kind of like cold or like nasty in some ways. You're like, or nobody cares, which has been my experience. Like, I'm gonna be gone next month, so that'll be for someone else to figure out. And then you have all these action items that are just unresolved.
Right. That definitely does happen. I think in my experience, yeah, but everyone's so busy too, even if that person's not necessarily leaving, but there's just like a study structure change with the
Yeah,
team.
yeah.
And it's difficult because everyone is so like we're all so busy that like I get it too, and I like to say that I'm almost perfect with responding to everything, providing everything, but everyone is being pulled in all different directions, and I feel for coordinators because I'm just like,
Yeah.
how are you still here, even if they have been there for more than a couple of years? I'm like, how are you still surviving? Like this is tough.
It's
Like it wears you down.
unbelievable. Unbelievable. And where I was with UCSF, finally they got like some structure in place. So there was at towards the end, and then it got disrupted by COVID, but towards the end there was some structure in place. But that site's like in the middle of Biotech Bay. So they have the coordinators there have options. It was across the
Yeah,
street was Genentech and then GSK. I mean, everyone was in that little area. So it's not
yeah.
like the coordinators didn't have options, but
Hmm.
some of them stuck around. And my favorite was trying to get something resolved, and they would just pass me to like other people, and everyone would pass me to someone else. And that was like your
Hmm.
whole day was chasing down who's supposed to do this action item, and then you're done. Then they're like, "Hey, you gotta go." So very
You know, in
efficient.
it In addition to that, I want to say another CRA of mine that I work with on a study, I was co-monitoring with her because we have a huge data cut coming up, and this one particular site in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, and there was a huge need. Even though I talked about data managers before, not there not being a lot of jobs right now domestically, they actually had a high demand for data managers. They're like they can't find enough, and so one of the data managers, so the data review, everything was incorrect in the EDC. And I kept like, wait, am I like, do I have the right patient up? Like, it took me a while to realize that it's like, wait, no, it's not me, it's them. And like, so the situation was they were scrambling to get data entry in because the visit prior, the data manager up and left because everything was just such a mess.
Wow.
And so they got a really good data manager back in to help, but like she was still new, so there was a lot of cleanup to be happening. But
Wow.
in the three like direct years of monitoring that I've had, it was insane how much stuff was wrong. Like there was just like a number of value, even lab values. It was just like point 0.1 or point 0.2 off. And it's like, wow, they're like they must really be speeding through these things because they weren't
Yeah.
necessarily they were just innocent mistakes everywhere.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was.
so there's obviously a lot going on with the new administration and budget cuts, and I didn't intend to ask you this, but because you're oncology, you're in a unique situation where you see AMCs as well as private sites, like you just mentioned. Have you noticed anything yet at the AMCs? Like, are they already being impacted?
Oh, that's a great question because I was actually going to ask you too, what your opinion. I
Yeah.
haven't seen anything yet. I feel like it just hasn't quite hit. It's sort of like COVID. Like COVID didn't really, in my point of view, COVID didn't really affect pharma and biotech, and like there was a delay. It was like well after the crisis part was over.
Hmm.
Like I feel like we saw a lot of layoffs and such like within the past year now till now. And I feel like that's sort of the delay. Like it might take a little bit. I really I don't know for sure, but I think it's like business as usual.
Okay.
You're there on site. Like I was on there doing my site initiation visit. It was really nothing. It's almost like the outside world didn't matter. Um,
Yeah.
we're just, we have our job to do still. We're still trying to, bring drugs to market. I was just having a conversation last night about I wonder what's going to happen to the pharma industry and the biotech and med devices. Because on my LinkedIn, all my posts that I see on my feed are all about FDA layoffs.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
it's a bit scary. But it's not, it hasn't affected me yet personally. So
Yeah. I know
yeah,
the
I'm
layoffs
curious.
from the FDA, the layoffs from FDA were for some reason from radiology and medical devices, which is unexpected, but that's RFK. honed in on that for some reason. There's no doubt there's inefficiency and waste at some of these large organizations. I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes, but I think the way to do it was not very thoughtful.
Mhm.
So my article's gonna come out Saturday, but they could have at least, and I understand. I mean, they're in a tough position. They have to balance the budget of the country. It's not just research, it's every department's getting slashed. We're just part of
Mhm.
it too. In order to do that, there's going to be a lot of pain. Like,
Yeah.
that's people voted to try to balance the budget, but I think there's victims in it, and the victims
Mhm.
are, in my opinion, the patients that are on like life-altering studies that where the plug was just pulled. Which I don't know if that was sensationalism or true. It's hard to tell these days.
Mhm.
I can't imagine even the AMC would allow that. Like patient not allowed to continue the study. I just don't see that as an option, but it very well might be. It was in the New York Times, like
Okay.
patients on a rare disease study, life or death treatment, and they were forced to not be in the study anymore. To me, that's crazy. I believe that's like 10%, maybe 15% of the cases. So I think they
Mhm.
should have had some provisions for those outliers. And,
Yeah.
I mean, there's one thing to slash costs, is another thing to like leave people out to dry on these kind of things. So it could have been done better. I'm hoping they go back in and have provisions for these things, and maybe it was like
Mhm.
sensationalist headlines. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but if that is true, man, that could have been done a lot better as far as executing those cuts for those situations. And like I say, I estimate that to be about 10 to 15% because most of the studies there are not rare disease or um, life-altering oncology where there's no other options or no
Mhm.
other like private sites you can send the patients to.
Right.
So it's tough, man, but I do think the budget needs to be balanced because as a country, we're in for a nightmare scenario in 2 decades from now if it's not, if it just continues to the waste continues to be reckless, which I mean it kind of was. Like it kind of still is. I've seen it myself, like I know. And private industry, there's waste too, and we're
Yeah.
considered way more efficient than academic medical center. So it's a tough situation, but I think it could have been handled better, at least for the patients with no other options. And I hope that's still going to be some provisions there for those people.
Mhm. Yeah, I when I was in grad school, I graduated in 2020. A big topic was about just patients being able to being on studies, being able to get, life, at least extending their lives a little bit longer,
Yeah,
especially those, terminal with oncology diseases. But to see the history of, when the government gets involved and, incentivizes, private companies, and their own research to we end up getting access to more drugs that end up making quality of life better, extending lives.
yeah,
One thing that pops in mind is immuno-oncology, like that whole section of oncology really like it grew so fast and it's still growing.
yes,
And I think that had to do with more, especially the administration making, extending patents, especially more for rare diseases, because, the world does, our world does work revolve, we need money to be moving around in our world. Like, I'm not naive to that. But it has to be in a way that like, okay, like let's incentivize this again. And because you know, we've brought in so much great quality drugs to market.
yeah,
Um, and I would hate to see that get impacted in a negative way.
of course. And it's going to hurt in the meantime. So there's a reason private sites exist, right? I mean, this inefficiency's been going on since the 80s. And actually, the company you work for used to be called Quintiles, right?
Mhm.
The guy, Dennis Gillings, he invented the idea of a CRO. He was working for UNC Raleigh,
Mhm.
and pharma came through there, and he said, you know what? Like, I can actually manage this stuff for you, like the hard parts, and you guys focus on the science. And they created the research, like CRO as we know it, and then the IRBs, the local IRBs, were like kind of too much red tape. So they're like, okay, well, there's private sites that do this. Let's go with them and create the central IRB. That was all created out of a need for more efficiency and more speed,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah.
kind of what Doge is doing as well. It's just, in my opinion, reckless in some cases. Their finger is on the same pulse. Like, it's just a matter of execution at the end of the day, right? And how you do it rather than a sledgehammer. I was watching Brad Hightower's podcast, and I think either he or someone else said we should have done these cuts with a scalpel, not a machete.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
you kind of have to get surgical with it. You can't just amputate the entire arm.
Yeah. My wishful thinking is that maybe these are just the growing pains and it'll
I hope
come
so.
together. Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so. I mean, you were with the Bluebird, they there's an element of our industry that relies on public-private partnerships. The ideas come from academia and then they get commercialized by the private industry, right? But like
Mhm.
funding basic research just to see how two enzymes interact with each other or how receptors work, like there's not necessarily money in that, but there's
Right.
scientists doing it for the sake of studying this stuff, right? Just for the sake of science. But the question becomes how much of the spending actually goes to that versus to bureaucrats that just kind of sit back and check boxes and they don't really do anything, right? Those people's incentives is to actually make things go longer so that they don't have more new stuff to work on. Like, I think the incentives are flipped, but hopefully we see a more private public partnerships and maybe
Mhm.
even at the site side. I know some AMCs were calling for RFPs back in the day, 2019, for doing public-private partnerships for sites, like for
Mhm.
AMCs to have their hub, but also have like private partnerships with the mom and pop clinics around the region. Uh,
Mhm.
so maybe we can see that actually take off. That would be kind of the best of both worlds. That's optimistic. I'm very optimistic, and sometimes I'm wrong.
I'm curious what you think about, because this is a question that I have just out to the universe right now, of with the, cuts in the DIA, programs and such, in clinical research, in the past 5 to, I guess my entire time in clinical research for about 10 years now, a lot more studies are looking to include more diverse populations for
Yep,
the studies.
yep.
And I wonder if the trickle effect of removing DEI from workforce and stuff, is that going to trickle and affect the subjects that the patients that come on to studies as subjects with diversity, and if that's going to
I hope
reduce
not.
all of that.
And that
Yeah, I
I
hope
hope
not
not.
too.
And that's the benefit of private industry. Like government cannot mandate. I own a site, Yuma Clinical
Mhm.
Trials, right?
Yep.
We receive $0 from the government. Matter of fact, we have to pay payroll tax and everything else. These mandates don't affect my site. I can hire whoever I want for whatever reason I want. I'm in a predominantly Hispanic area, so it makes sense to have Hispanic staff, right? Same thing with sites in predominantly black areas. Their incentive is to have black staff. The government can't touch us. The government can't mandate what we do. And that's the beauty of capitalism and private industry. Now, if I were at AMC in charge of hiring and my boss just told me, hey, merit based only, which who can argue that, right? But then you're
Right.
getting scrutinized every decision you make. Like, well, was that a DEI hire or was that a merit based hire? And you're just going to go the safe route most of the time, right? And that's where DEI kind of at the larger institution, public funded institutions, I think people are going to have issues. But the CROs, like what you work for is a private CRO, sponsors. I talked to Takeda, they're one of our Save Our Sites sponsors.
Nice.
They have nothing to do with the government mandates for NIH and all that. They said we are
Mhm.
as committed as ever to diversity in our staff, in our sites. We still have those recruitment action plans. So that's not stopping. If it stops in academia for whatever reason, maybe indirect consequences, that's a cause and effect based on policy and people trying to keep their jobs.
Mhm.
I don't see it stopping anything in private industry, which is what, like 70% of the activities at private sites, private CROs. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's an issue, private industry, and whether it is public academic medical centers. If it is, it's an indirect consequence of someone not trying to lose their job,
Yeah.
which I don't know another way to answer that one, but it sucks. But who can argue against merit-based hiring? Like, there have been cases where maybe not the best person has been hired because of they checked the box, and that sucks for those groups too. Like, if you actually are someone, let's say a Hispanic person that really does deserve the job, and you got it,
Mhm.
and then your colleagues look at you like, "Oh, you're just a DEI hire." I mean, I think it does a disservice to the groups they're trying to help as well. So hopefully we get back to just merit based and people don't get afraid to hire underserved groups again. That's my
Yeah.
take.
In my experience too, more so in the support roles that I was in, like talent, that merit-based, like talent is, it fluctuates everywhere with everyone. I think you have people who do the bare minimum, but
Yeah,
still are doing the work that they need to do. There are people who are going above and beyond, which I come across more of
yeah.
in this industry. Um, I've learned so much just from working with the people around me, just them just making me better, just from, I don't know if it's like just the osmosis of just hanging around them and absorbing their knowledge, their work ethics, and it's just evolved mine. But yeah, I've found that all that talent just fluctuates with everyone, and everyone has different strengths, different they bring different things to the table, even if that includes um, we have DEI people who are maybe it was a DEI hire, but they're also the best candidate. And I
Yeah.
feel like people don't talk about that as much.
But the problem is the more focus that's on this issue, like this issue is and this is what people don't want to discuss. It's a two-edged sword because yeah, it's supposed to motivate you to be open about who you hire. The downside is you hire someone, like I said, like a Hispanic or a black person who's like the best person for the job, regardless of race or background. They're getting judged like as a DEI hire by their colleagues. And like, oh, you get
Mhm,
promoted just because you're black, right? And so you almost have to, if you're that person, you almost have to work twice as hard to prove that's not the case, which is not fair for that person. And it's not helping people from that group in the first place. So there is like as politically incorrect as it sounds to say, let's not focus on DEI and let private industry kind of do it anyways.
mhm.
There's some benefits to that too, because maybe all this like pointing the finger, oh, you're only in that role because you're a DEI, like goes away. Because that
Right.
I think that's the dirty part about these words too. Like everyone focuses on, oh, underserved, yeah, but what about the ones who have earned it just because they're black, they're getting judged that they're a DEI hire? I think that's ridiculous.
Absolutely. Um, and I just hope it doesn't ruin people's lives, their careers, because everyone's working so hard. There are people out there working harder than me, or, work
Yeah.
farther beyond me too in their roles, and yet they're being criticized
I've
just
had
because people
PIs
think
of
they're
mine tell me, like my own PIs tell me, I have to watch what I say and how I act as a human being just because I'm black. And like that's a unfair pressure that's placed on them. And I think the more focus on DEI, the more pressure that becomes because
Mhm.
his peers look at him like, well, are you really a good doctor? Or are you just like because you're black, Like, is that why you're getting these studies, or are you actually good? And he can't. His room for error is a lot narrower than like a white person's who wouldn't
Mm,
have to deal with that. So I think it's a disservice to everybody ultimately. I think merit-based. I'm not against like hateful rhetoric or like racism, but let's just get back to the basics and like the people who earn it, let's have them do the roles.
mhm. That reminds me a little bit of something I just want to share. I was at a leadership conference one weekend, and there were people of all different kinds of people. It's a very diverse group, but in terms of like careers, it was also very diverse. Like I was sitting and chatting with someone who owned a CrossFit gym, and then I was talking to someone who a doctor, and we were all there for different reasons. And the CrossFit guy was just holding himself back from like buying certain equipment, and he just like couldn't get to, like it helped him pull the trigger to actually get those things that he was thinking about. And then this doctor, who you could just in conversation you can tell is just super intelligent. She was very insecure about her accent because English isn't her first language. And that so she was there to help pass through those barriers that she puts on herself because she doesn't like any of that judgment with the fact that her accent is so heavy. And she had explained to me about she's taking um, one-on-one sessions with speech pathologists to help with accents and stuff. And so just very interesting, like, even just super high achieving people, they're also that's kind of comes back to it's unfortunate that all the merit that they have, and yet they're
Yeah.
still in that arena too. That battle.
Yes. It's ultimately like this stills back to that knowledge and trade. Like some of the best as a CRA, just so we can talk apples to apples. When I was at that AMC and there was turnover every time I went, I didn't care what background, what color, what accent, even if they spoke English. Just if you're gonna do these
Yeah.
action items, that's really all I care about. And like it boils down to that. Can you do the job, and are you gonna be good at doing this role? We have with our Latinos in clinical research, Monica Quitiva. She's very self-conscious about her accent, yet she's been able to accomplish so much and continues to do it
Mhm.
despite what she perceives to be her handicap. But she works on it, and it's now she leans into it. It's become part of who she is and her brand. And ultimately, we're all different in some ways, and I think just it boils down to, can you do the job? Are you effective at what you do, at your knowledge and at your trades? Like, very simple. And but at the same time, networking and having peer groups that you can relate to is important. That's why we have Latinos in clinical research. It's a very common thing amongst some Latinos, like the accent, English as the second language.
Mhm. Yeah. I haven't because I'm more in the Northeast. I mean, I do travel. My region's the Northeast, but I go down south. I go to the Midwest a lot. And it's funny. Like this job has also opened up and broken, stereotypical things about certain areas.
Yeah.
Like it was actually pretty diverse when I went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I guess I was just expecting to see more of what I understand of what Middle America looks like, and yet I met the most diverse, friendly people. And I'm like, wow, like I should, I'm grateful that this job allows me to get exposed to the
Yeah.
rest of my country. It's amazing in that way. Yeah, and it always puts a smile on my face, and I walk away always feeling so grateful. But yeah, but we have our pain points of turnover. It's almost like it doesn't matter where. Um, and but I like diversity. I like meeting new people. My parents were immigrants. They immigrated here from Portugal. I was
Ah,
first
okay.
generation here. But we did. I grew up in a very white town, very heavy Portuguese and Portuguese speaking communities. There are lots of Brazilians and such too. So lots of Latinos in the area as
Hmm.
well. So when I actually was working in clinical research, in the beginning, I did question that because a lot of past research in our history really focused around white men.
Yes.
Um, and so it just, understanding more diversity, luckily I started working on studies that were really pushing for, we're looking to include more diverse populations. And it was
Yes.
just, I
Yes.
guess for me, it was just good timing to see all of that. So I'm hoping that that wave keeps going and keeps getting stronger with including more diversity, not just with our patients, but the people who work in clinical research. I think,
And that's where the
there's,
nuances matter. I think where when it comes to patients being enrolled, right? The need for diverse patients in our studies is at all-time high. This is why my site is getting studies. Like, we're a relatively new site, but we're getting opportunities because we have NADAM population here. We have huge Hispanic population. It's also a military town, so we have enough black population here to put in these studies. And then my hiring has to reflect the community. So if I have, let's say,
yeah.
a white person or even a Hispanic, I've had this situation. Hispanic person or white person, no Spanish speaking.
Mhm.
Hispanic person, Spanish speaking. Almost identical. Maybe even the Spanish speaker is just slightly less experienced. Like on paper, the non-Spanish speaker is better for the job. But knowing my population and my needs at the time, I'm going with the Spanish speaker
Mhm.
because they can relate to my population better. And
Yeah,
so some would say, well, that's diversity hire. Well, not really. That's a needs-based hire right there.
yeah,
And that's all subjective too, because if I have enough staff to speak Spanish, maybe I do go with the slightly more experienced one. It's always a crapshoot anyways, who you're gonna hire. You could only make the best decisions you can at that time. And so this diversity hiring stuff, I think it just needs to boil down to can you get patients in your studies that are reflective of your community? And that to
yeah.
me,
And
that's what it boils down to, like simple stuff.
yeah, when I took your course, the your CRA Academy course, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. I remember our class, just based off of names and the sound, and because I didn't see people because it was virtual, just based off of names and the way the sounds that people were making as they were speaking, I could tell it was a diverse class, and that was something that was important to me because it's like good, like I'm just like glad like people are learning, they're going to be out there and be great
Yeah.
CRAs. I really enjoyed your class. I actually think it was a very, of all the courses I've taken, I thought yours was very valuable. And I learned like the foundation of everyday monitoring from your class. And
Wow.
that's where I still pick up a lot of the things that I question and think about. I think about your class to help refocus me, especially when it comes to source data monitoring. Because that's something I think a lot of CRAs still, even myself, like we still have questions. We still, because we're piecing that story together. We're attesting that this information is real, it's true. It happened according to the protocol and country regulations. And so one of my not regrets, it's like I wish I knew about clinical research when I was in college so that I could have actually
Mhm.
focused on that. It wasn't until much later that I was just, searching, fulfilling things to do in the health industry. I wanted to be a doctor at one point, but I realized early on that that wasn't for me. And then once I came across clinical research, I was like, wow, like this is great. People have great careers in this. And so like I hope, folks listening to this podcast, if they have if they're interested in clinical research, like take a course. There are free courses to take too.
Yeah.
Like take some of these. Like it's going to teach you so much and it's going to prime you really well. Um, and one thing I do regret is not becoming a study coordinator at the hospital level, because that, even though that's, I guess in the industry we sort of look at that as like the lowest, rung on the ladder, but it's like you end up with so much knowledge. Like you really know, like the best CRAs that I've worked with were study coordinators
I
before.
agree.
Yeah, and I think, even if you, and I know it's also a role that's looked at as a stepping stone role.
Well, even my
Um,
coordinators at my site can tell when a CRA comes in after he or she leaves. They're always like, yeah, that person was a coordinator, or no, they never were. And then they go to their LinkedIn and they're like, "See, I told you. You can
Yeah,
tell.
it's
You can tell."
I worked with a this really nice, I forget where it was, this study coordinator that wanted to become a CRA. And I didn't know how long he had worked there yet. Like we were just chatting, just chatting. It was nice that we could just talk about some of our interests and such. Because I didn't have a super heavy day, and he was like, "Yeah, like I really wanted to be a CRA, and I want to look into it." I'm like, "Well, you're a study coordinator. Like you practically are already
Yeah.
trained to be a
Yeah.
CRA." So I asked him to send me his resume so that I could submit it. So I'm like, "You're like a perfect candidate." I don't know if he ended up getting contacted because that was I was there. It was during a closeout visit that I was there.
Uh,
But yeah, even when I worked on the sponsor side, we didn't poach the study coordinator. She just was interested and she applied to the sponsor company, and she was an amazing addition. And
wow.
right now, I believe she's a medical writer. Um,
Wow.
and so like her career took off real fast, and it's that study coordinator position that really like sets you up. It is a,
Yeah.
I always am grateful for my study coordinators, even for the ones that aren't, 100% amazing. It's like they're doing so much work, they're juggling so much, a lot of those responsibilities that are really on the PI, all on the study coordinator. There's a lot that they have to do. And the site that I was at, I mentioned it because in my career path, I was an acting clinical trial manager with a senior CRA title. It was sort of we could handle smaller studies. It was a long-term follow-up study. But I felt like I was making decisions a bit blindly because I'm like, all right, these are affecting the sites. I'm like, I realized I'm just asking them to do so much more and more work. I'm like, this isn't right. Like, am I doing this right? And I knew I was, but I decided that, you know what, let me go spend some time out being a field monitor. And, I was lucky somebody referred me. I got into IQVIA, which I really love IQVIA as a
Yeah.
company. They've actually they treat me really well.
They're the
And
strongest ones. I think when you hear layoffs, you hear like it's last from them
mhm,
usually.
yeah, I think they're good at keeping like our managers, our resourcing, everyone, is great. I've been very fortunate. Like I've worked with
Yeah.
amazing people in this industry. I don't think there's anyone or any company that I've been like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like my moves were more for strategic career moves,
Of
trying to
course.
climb the ladder a little. It's tough to land a CRA role. There's a need for them. Like we physically have to get out there onto these sites. Even if
Yeah.
most of what we're doing is remote, we still got to get out there
You're
sometimes.
trading your
Um,
life basically because, most jobs you go to work, you come home, right? When you travel, you're in a hotel, you sleep somewhere else. That's
yeah.
sacrifice. The people don't realize that.
And like if there's bad weather, like anywhere in the country, it just has such a ripple effect with, all the airlines.
That travel
Um,
stress is, I mean, that's where you guys get paid the premium. Well, at least you should, is dealing with that travel stress. Like, that's not really part of your job, but it is because you
yeah.
got to deal with flights, hotels, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And even where I work, I'm just more of a worrywart. Like I'm constantly worrying about something. But the company I work for, like they're super flexible with that kind of stuff, and everyone should, speak up and talk to their superiors about like, okay, like this is going to be dangerous. Like I'm going to need some extra time in this city that I'm in, and like I've never had an issue with that.
Yeah.
You know, flexibility like this is a high burnout job, but if you can get ahead of that and work with your superiors, your teams to manage like, all right, I'm going to need like an extra night here.
Yeah.
No one's ever said no to me because every no one wants me to burn out, and I appreciate that because I don't want to leave this industry. I don't like I this is my chosen career path, and I want to take this, especially this field monitoring experience, because I do eventually want to go back in-house and get back on the clinical trial management side, but having the CRA experience, because the best CRAs for me that I've seen were study coordinators. The best clinical trial managers or project managers, they were CRAs before. Like they know exactly what it's like on site. They know what they're asking the sites to do, and they know the burden of these requests. And they appreciate a lot of that work that the sites do pull through and do the work. Even if it's late, like it's getting done, they're doing it. It's all hands on deck. Like even with those turnovers, these sites are they're finding people. I wish they found more people quicker. They I think they could definitely use more people, you know, at the clinics, at our sites. Like this is such a regulated industry that like the regulation part is its own job. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm hoping with diversity we can really expand all of that.
it's
I think it's a
happening.
great industry for people
It's
to go into.
happening. It's happening slowly. I really think this whole diversity initiative with getting more minority patients in studies, we need more sites, right? We can't just keep recycling the same old sites over and over again. Like you're
Mhm.
gonna get the same results. Like what happened last time when you contracted that site? They didn't really provide the diversity numbers. They all say they have it. Cool. But then when you actually do the study, you're like, oh, well, they were lacking a little. So it takes some risk on the part of the sponsor in Sierra to go out, go to Yuma, Arizona, go to Mobile, Alabama. Like it's a little bit of a more unproven PI, but they definitely have the population. You don't even need to look at their database, Jason. Just go walk around the city. Like
Yeah,
these are your patients. Like, what
yeah,
database do you need to prove diversity? Just go look around the city and you'll see, okay, well, maybe that site needs a little extra monitoring visits or a little more hand-holding. But I do think sponsors are aware of that and they are making those moves. And shout out to people like Takeda and Eli Lilly and AbbVie that I've seen doing this personally. And I think they're leading the way for the rest.
yeah. I agree. My hope is that that influences other companies to also do the same and go out there and look for those clinics, those populations. Like recruitment is such a huge thing. Like we have to. It's not like you open up a study and people are just pouring in. So many people that I know, I work in this industry. I ask other people like, hey, like, do you know about clinical trials? Like, do you even know that you could even volunteer for something?
Yeah.
And everyone I speak to, for the most part, and this is just my own experience, my own anecdotal experience, but like even in living in the Boston area where there's clinical trials going on all the time, all these hospitals, no one really knows. And
Nobody.
it's I find it interesting because it's like you would think there'd be more advertisements or just more
More
knowledge,
outreach.
exposure.
More
Yeah.
outreach. We had a sponsor, a huge sponsor. I already gave them a shout out, so you guys can guess which of the three. We were on a study. They needed Native American population study wide, right? And this was towards the end of the study. They're like, hey, we actually lacking some Native American. Let's contact all the sites in Arizona, Oklahoma, wherever there's a huge NatAm population or potential. So they contacted me. They said, hey, can you get at least one or two Native American? I know we only have a month left of screening, but we really need this. We'll give you whatever
Mhm.
budget you need. So we proposed a budget. We got 3 grand to go out and do a community outreach at the Native American Health Center here in Yuma. It's actually technically in California across the border, but it's basically Yuma, Arizona. And we did the lunch and learn with doctors there. That didn't generate anything. The fact that we were out there was a corner store next to where we were doing the outreach where me and Jaime went before and after to get snacks and stuff for ourselves. The cashier asked us, what are you guys doing here? And well, we're here to do outreach. The cashier joined a study and they referred 3 of their friends to do the study. It was an indirect consequence of just being there. Like we were there for that health center, right? Which
Yeah,
there's red tape. Nobody really did anything. But that 3 grand still gave ROI because of just the fact that we're there. It was indirect consequence. And we got their 2 patients that they needed. And so
nice.
that's what it takes. Like things that are it's always unexpected, but it's just the fact that you are taking action is what's important. Not saying you're doing something or having a plan. I see so many people wasting time with plans. Like, if we would have wasted time with that plan, we would have never gone to that community store where that was where the real action was. So now I know next time we do this, we're just going to partner with those local businesses instead of the
Yeah,
health center because there's no
yeah,
red tape there. And then we're still going to end up getting the same population we're trying to get in the first place.
exactly.
So no plan there, right? It's just
Yeah,
that was an accident, but now next time we double down on that accident because that accident, and if you think about it, that's how research and development works. Like you have a plan, this molecule is going to do this. Well, it turns out it's actually doing this. Let's double down on that now. No different.
yeah,
No
I
different.
agree.
But Jason, it's been a pleasure, man. I mean, we got to do this
Likewise.
again. There's so much more we can get into, but well, I guess we'll save it for part two. This
Yeah,
is
and just
real
to throw it out there,
talk.
like, yeah, happy to if anyone wants to contact me, be it LinkedIn or anything, my contact information's in there as well. Happy to talk about um, career, especially when, newly grads reach out, and I'm happy to give them some
Oh, you're
advice.
gonna get a bunch.
Um, yeah, and even if
Jason's LinkedIn's underneath.
people think about taking your CRA Academy course, I took it. I'm happy to share what the value that I got out of it. Like I am now a senior CRA, an actual field monitor. I did get my training at the company I work for, but it just made it that much easier that I was able to have that knowledge I got from you and your team. Like there was actual conversation. We were interacting with each other. It wasn't just us watching videos. We had those weekly calls that we could call into. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's great when you can actually talk about the work you're trying to get into, or if you're already in it. So a lot of great opportunities, and I'm glad that you've become such a big influencer in the clinical research industry. And so I'm very honored that you asked me to be on this podcast as well. So I
Yeah,
thank you very
no,
much.
it's always great to hear from like our alumni, and we only Venmo Jason a little bit for the nice plug. Thank you, Jason. You know what I just thought right now? That Bluebird bio that you worked for. Just
Mhm,
we'll end this on a positive note for people. It's not all doom and gloom because RFK came out the other day. When you're like confirmed or whatever, you have to disclose your holdings. He owns a lot of CRISPR-based stocks, like genetic. And then now the theory is that he's very pro gene editing. And
mhm,
so the logic is there's going to be a lot of money funneled into gene editing now with this new regime. Your experience at Bluebird Bio, I mean, that was one of the first gene editing. Beta thalassemia or whatever was one of the first indications for gene editing, like
mhm.
worldwide.
Yeah,
And so your experience there is gonna be super beneficial going forward into this next decade. Oncology, of course, that's always unfortunately, but gene editing now, and that was like kind of a wild card for you at the time.
mhm. Yeah. And it was very interesting. And it was, working on oncology, it's very difficult, complex protocol studies. But once, and it's all intimidating at first, but once you're in it and you start really knowing it, and
Yeah.
to me, it's very fulfilling.
Yes. Yes. And more just to end on more positive stuff, because not all bad. Life is, a little bit of gray. Nutraceutical, RFK's already come out and say we want to do studies on nutraceuticals. That's
Hmm.
an area in my 20 years, I've only done one study. I would personally like to do more, even if they're less paying trials. But if we can do more of them and actually have a positive impact on our community, like Yuma would benefit from that. Forget about our
Yeah.
budget. We'll make our money, but those would be good study opportunities for the community. So I'm hoping to see a lot of progress despite the rhetoric that it's going to be all bad. I don't think that's how things work necessarily. I think there's elements that are horrible, and then
Hmm.
there's elements that are promising. So let's focus on the promising and let's hope that the horrible is not as horrible as we think.
Right.
That's my thesis.
Hopefully. Yeah. I'm right there with you.
Thank you, Jason. Everybody go connect right now. His LinkedIn is underneath the video or the show notes. Go follow him. like, subscribe, comment, share. We'll do it again, Jason.
Great. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.